On my way to that game, I was sitting in the car, and I mean, the emotions, you can't believe the emotion that goes through you. And it was just unreal, the experience. It was completely unreal. I'll never, ever be in that room again. Never be. But that day I was in that room with Elrich, getting his cap. It was an unbelievable experience. You're down then. You're very, very down then. You come from watching your child singing the national anthem, playing against the All Blacks in Ellis Park, to watching your child with a blown up knee in hospital. It's a difference in night. It's a free fall.
Welcome back to The Long Way to the Game, our series with Paul Avenant. So today we've decided to branch out a little bit. We're not talking about supporters only. We're looking at people behind the rugby, the parents, the wives, the supporters, everybody else. And today it's my pleasure to welcome David Louw, father of Elrich Louw, one of our up-and-coming young Springboks. And we're going to talk to him about being a parent, what it was like bringing up somebody like Elrich. Was he always destined for greatness? And without further ado, welcome, Paul. Welcome, David. Nice to have you.
Thank you very much, Emvia. It's good to be here. I've been looking forward to watching all your podcasts, looking forward to be part of one someday. And here we are.
Important thing to know about this podcast, it's not going to be about Elrich Louw. We're not going to talk about what's happening at the Bulls. We're not going to talk about, Elrich's stats and everything else. We're going to talk about you as a parent. And let's start with that. How did that journey with Elrich start? Was he always a rugby player, or did he sort of happen into rugby? How did he end up becoming a professional rugby player?
Yeah, look, we've always had rugby in our family. I've always taken him to games at Loftus, at Ellis Park. I don't know how far should we go back. He was born in Pretoria. He was in primary school, in a little school, not a little school, in a school in Vanderbijl Park, and with a good rugby tradition. The school, he played the old Billikie rugby. He was always fairly good. He was never. You always get that especially in primary school. You always get that one player that's bigger than everybody, and he runs over everybody, and he's mainly the team. Elrich was never that one. Elrich was always fairly good. I think the one thing that Elrich got from me or from his parents is his ball sense. He's got ball sense. He can do any ball sport quite good, and that helps, especially when you're young, because skills are the big thing. So he played rugby in primary school. And then he started to do horse riding around about grade 4. And he did horse riding quite seriously. So much that in grade 6, he decided to not play rugby that year and concentrate on horse riding. And he was a bloody good horse rider. And I'm convinced, maybe because me, myself, are still very much involved in horses. But I'm convinced that the horse riding had a very big influence in his shape, his personality shape for what you need to be a professional sportman. It's not something that everybody must go do and they'll become professional sportmen. But I just think that horse riding is about a lot of discipline. It's about having a lot of bad days. Horse riding is having a lot of bad days. Horse riding learns you to have endurance. He did do a lot of endurance riding, and let me tell you, to do endurance riding takes a lot. It's not easy. It's hard work. And the other thing with horse riding is, because you have another being that's alive, that's got a headache, that's not feeling lekker, that's maybe got a little bit of a iffy strain or something, and the only way a horse can tell you that he's not feeling well is by having resistance. And when the horse has resistance, you're having a bad day. You're either going to fall off or he's not going to do what you want to. And you need to stand up, wake up tomorrow morning and do it again. You can't stop, because the moment you stop, you're going to go backwards. And the first time that I saw that Eric has got a bit of fast bite in him that I haven't got, is we have they call it the tour around the Val Dam, where they do from the 26th of December till the 31st of December, they do a tour around Val Dam, and it's about 350 kilometers in 5 days. And by day 3, it was scorching hot. And Eric, when we got to the overnight place, he was crying. And he got off and he couldn't even walk, so sore he was. And I said to him, okay, no, let's call it a day. And the next morning, when I woke up, he was saddling up his horse and he was going. And I just realized, that he's got a grit in him that I don't have. And that's something that you need for professional sport. So I think horse riding definitely, he did the endurance riding and then he did dressage riding. He did very well. He won the South African Schools League Championship. He was first in that. So he did very well, and I think it taught him a lot of lessons that helped him with rugby. So in grade 6 he didn't play rugby. In grade 7 he did play again for the first team of his primary school. So yes, I think so. As I said, he was never the standout player, but he was always good. He was always sort of one of the better ones.
And what position did he play?
He actually played prop from mini rugby up to grade 10. Grade 9 he played prop. And then in grade 9 he sort of just like started to grow a lot, and he moved from prop to loose forward, to 8-man.
I have a question for you. Is there a time where you can remember where you felt there's something special about him as a rugby player, where it was not just he's a good rugby player, he's my son, but you felt there's something there's legs in him in this rugby thing?
Paul, that's a difficult thing, because if you're going to ask any parent, they're going to tell you my son's going to be a Springbok. You always see in your child more than, but let me answer you like that. As I said, he was always a good rugby player, and he moved from he was in a very small little high school in Vereniging, and he played under 14, under 15, and under 16 in a very, very good team. They played in small leagues, but they won a lot of them. And then he moved to a school in Vanderbijl, Transvaal, that's more like a recognized rugby school. And he went there in grade 11, so he was new in the school. And, I was sort of expecting and hoping that he's going to play for the second team and bench for the first team. So with their very first game in grade 11, as they announced the team, he called me and I said to him, "Yes, Eric, what's happening? He says, no, he's starting for the first team." And I said, yes, and I was so excited for him that he was, that's a big thing. It's a big school. They don't know him. And he said to me, he's captain also. And it's the first time in that school's history that a grade 11 pupil was captain of the first team. And that day, I sort of thought maybe there's something. Yeah, maybe he's got more than I can see.
I just recently saw something where they said the odds of a player playing schoolboy rugby becoming a Springbok, and it's something like 0.0016% or something. it's that low. And so I know that feeling that you talk about where every parent hopes for and dreams and thinks, but the odds are so
Yeah.
low. So it's kind of incredible when you see that happen.
Yes. The thing is that you can never tell a child that's playing rugby in school that he can't. But you need to tell him what the odds are. Now, Erich got we'll talk about how he got the contract, but he got a contract to the Cheetahs out of high school. And we went there, and Franco Smith's brother, MV Smith, was team manager at the Cheetahs. And when they contracted like 45 young players out of all the big schools, Paul Roos, Paul Boys, Gray, and the Okies were sit there in front, and MV came to the podium, and he said to them, he did a bit more of a speech, but let's not waste time on that. The bottom line is, he said that maybe 3 of you guys, of all you guys that's sitting in front of me, are going to get senior contracts. Maybe. And everybody was like, it was like a reality check for everybody, because it's now everybody, they've got contracts and everybody's, so happy, and they think they're going to make a living out of rugby. And he just told them. And that was the truth. Only 3 guys. It was Erich, James Molense, and Cameron Dawson. He still plays for the Cheetahs. They're the only 3 guys from that group that made it to senior rugby.
And how was Elrich at that time about it? Was he like, this is what I want to do, I'm working, this is my dream? Or was he like a teenager, a young man, like, oh, I'm doing this, if it's going well, it's good, if it's not, it's not? How important was it at that point for him?
You know what, Paul, the thing with rugby is that I don't know if you know that they've got the green squad. They call it the green squad. It's the SA Rugby identifies, I don't know how many players, because maybe somebody knows and they're going to call me out. But I thought it was like 45, 50 players that they identify on grade 10 level. And those players come together once a year. Then the core of that group forms the SA Schools team in there. And then the core of 2 years of SA Schools teams becomes the Junior Bokke, the under 20 Junior Bokke. Mm-hmm. So if you are not in the green squad, your chances of getting into that is very, very slim. Very, very slim. Okay, now I'm just in the process of answering your question. So Erich was very motivated. He's never been a child that talks a lot, that says he's going to break everybody down, and he's just going about his business. But he got a coach at the Cheetahs junior, Tiaan Liebenberg. He used to be a Stormers hooker and Springbok hooker, and him and Tiaan just clicked. And that's the thing with Elrich, been right through his rugby playing career from primary school, as he always got along with his coaches, because he was such a hard worker, because he was not a talker, because he was not flashy, because he was not somebody that tried to impress the girls and impress this. He was just going about it. So him and Tiaan just clicked. And very few people give Tiaan the credit for Erich's career that he deserves. Because if it wasn't for Tiaan, I'm not sure if Erich would, because Erich got into junior rugby after school without the CV, without a CV. He didn't have a CV. He didn't play Grand Como in grade 10. He didn't play Crime Week in grade 11. He played Crime Week in grade 12. He had a very average Crime Week because he played in the Falke, which is not a very good union. He was not SA Schools, obviously. He was not SA Schools B team. at the Craven Week, they identify, apart from the SA Schools team and SA School B team, they identify 45 players, which they tell them, listen, we're watching you. And he was not even part of that. So he went into the junior rugby without any CV at all to go somewhere. And him and Tiaan just clicked, and Elrich just worked harder than anybody else. He just put his head down. And Tiaan found Sean Roux, who was the junior coach at that stage. And he said to Sean, you need to give this guy a chance. And Sean said to him, listen, Tiaan, we've already chosen this team. There's only one or two guys that sort of fringe players that's maybe going to get into this team. And Tiaan just said to him, you need to give this guy a chance. You need to give him a chance. And he said to him, okay, we're having a training camp for 45 under 20s and 35 under 19s. And then it's going to be narrowed down to 45, a group of 45. If he gets in, he can be in the 45, but then it's up to him. And he was, at the end of it, he was starting for the junior Bokke. So that was all about what his commitment, his work, what Elrich did, not what anybody else did. It was all about what he was willing to do to achieve what he wants to.
And can you talk a little bit? You mentioned the junior Bokke. Like, can you talk about as he transitioned into that team or got his opportunity there, and also just how you felt at that time? I don't know, as a parent, like how much you were involved during his high school, but as you go higher and higher up the pyramid, there's a tendency for you lose a little bit of contact or control or ability to give input.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that move to the junior box?
Yes, it's I've always been involved with his rugby. I've always been. I've never missed a match that I can watch. Never. If I can watch a match, I was there. But I've never been a parent that talked to the coaches and said, you need to choose him, you need to this, or why are you not choosing him? Why is he on the bench? Why is he not playing? Never. I've never been that guy. I did speak to Tiaan. I had a relationship, not a relationship with Tiaan. I did speak to Tiaan, never about Elrich and what, just, I was just very excited. I just wanted to know the inside because Elrich was never talking about that. I just wanted to, and even Robbie Kempson at the Kings, me and Robbie spoke a few times. But you realize that you cannot influence professional people to do their job when you're just a parent. You can't tell Robbie Kempson or Sean Roux or anybody like that what they must do and how they must do it. You can talk to them of what you're seeing in a bigger picture, but you cannot talk about what involves Elrich. So I very quickly realized that but it wasn't an adjustment for me because I've never been a influence parent. I've never been onto a coach. I've never been, if he was chosen or not chosen, I've never tried to influence that. But you realize my big thing was the day I realized that Elrich doesn't want to listen to me anymore. That was not lekker. There comes a day when you realize that he knows more than you, and the only life lessons he wants to hear from you is the ones you ask for. You don't give him advice unless you ask for it, and that's a bit of you need to adapt to how your relationship with your child is. When you realize that he's not gonna want you to tell him what to do and what not to do. I can't call Elrich now and tell him, yes, I think you should run more with the ball, or you should be more on the. They've got their plans. They don't listen to me. That's just, and that was a bit of a wake up call for me.
Does he ever, do you and him ever after a game talk about the game, like just in terms of how, not specifically him even, or is it just you don't talk about the game after the games?
You know, I would tell him you had a good game. I would not tell him if he had a good game, if he had a bad game. I wouldn't say you had a bad game. I would say the game just didn't come to you, which is the truth. No player, no professional player has a bad game intentionally. The game comes to you or it doesn't, especially the position he's playing. You go left, the ball goes right. In defense and attack, you go right, the ball goes left. Before you tackle a guy, he passes the ball. So sometimes the game just doesn't come to you, and when I tell him this game didn't come to you, it was not a good game, but he's very hard on himself. I don't need to be hard on him. He'll tell me I had a game, but I wouldn't tell him that. But apart from that, the one thing about Elrich, he's never, ever, ever, since the first day he played professional rugby, has he ever told me anything out of the changing room? Never once. He's not even funny stuff. I mean, he wouldn't even call me and say, yes, Dad, you won't believe what Johan Goosen did today on the training field. Never. And it's, on the one hand, it's a bit frustrating for me because I would like to know that stuff. Even with the Springboks, there was a time in Nelspruit when there was a big thing happening there, and I just wanted to know some insight. I just wanted him to tell me something, and I got myself to ask him because I normally don't, and I asked him about it, and he just said, "I know what you know." That's all. He didn't say anything else. That's all he said. I just know what you know. Mm-hmm. So no, he doesn't talk at all out of the change room. Never. And, as I said, it's a bit frustrating for me on one hand, but on the other hand, I respect him for that because that's professionalism. Mm-hmm. There was another player's parent I know, I wouldn't say a name, and he was on one Bok tour. And he told me a lot of stories. And I just feel like sometimes things just needs to stay within the team. It needs to be not sacred. Maybe sacred is too much, but it needs to be professional. It needs to be handled like that. And that I respect Eric for that.
David, you talked about the Cheetahs. Now you went to the Cheetahs, but you just mentioned they ended up at the Kings at some stage. How did that happen?
Okay, so let me just first tell you how you got to the Cheetahs, because there is a little bit of a misconception in because when Eric got chosen for the Springboks the first time, it was a euphoria of a week that you cannot explain that to somebody. But the whole thing was a little bit bittersweet because they had a front page article with Elrich's high school coach, and that guy, he didn't flatter himself in what he said in that article, and that made it a little bit bitter. But and he said a lot of things about how Elrich got to the Cheetahs, which was not true. So the day in his matric year, they played Menlo Park. Me and him went to the Mug and Bean before the game, and we sat there, and he said to me, he wants to play professional rugby. He doesn't know how to do it. And I said, well, I don't know. I've got no idea how to do it. And he said to me, he's got friends in the first team that's got agents. And I said, I didn't even know there were sport agents in South Africa. And I sat in the Mug and Bean, and I Googled on my phone sport agents, and 4 or 5, no, they came up, a lot came up, and I mailed about 4 or 5. And only one guy returned my email because I said everything about Arif. I mean, he, obviously, as I said, he didn't have much of a CV in terms of junior rugby. And only one guy replied, Eben, he's still with the Bulls. He's the Bulls marketing guy. He had an agency, Sterling Sport. He was the only guy that replied in the email. And he said we must come and see him. And he got him a junior contract at the Cheetahs. Very, very small contract. Basically just pocket money. But that's where he started. So, as I said before, he got into the junior Bokke. And that's when the whole thing with what's next came up. And he got a few offers. He didn't get a lot of offers out of South Africa. I think the Sharks was sort of looking at him, but the Sharks had Pepsi, which was also with the junior Bokke with Elrich. And the Bulls was not really, but they were sort of asking questions. And the few overseas clubs, Toulon was offered him a lot of money, but they offered him a junior contract, and Eric said he doesn't want a junior contract. He wants a senior contract. Even though he was only under 20 at that stage, he said he wanted a senior contract. And they started to talk to Robbie Kempson, and I was not keen on that because the Kings was not performing well. They didn't have very good exposure. They didn't have one Springbok at that stage. They were not looked at. They were doing badly in the Pro 14 at that stage. And we had a very long conversation with his agent. And they decided that it's for a senior contract, it's going to be the best for him to go to the Kings. For experience, playing senior rugby, not getting lost in a big group, getting game time, and I think it was a good option because he did get all that, and he did make himself a name at the Kings. Even though he played 16 games for the Kings, I think they won 1 out of those 16.
I remember those days.
They played Namibia and they lost to Namibia.
I was just going to ask. I know you're a big Bulls fan. Did it in any way kind of influence you watching your son play for the Kings? Like just how you felt, like thinking, "Oh, I wish he played for the Bulls," or did you just adopt the team because your son was playing for them?
No, you know, when he played for the Cheetahs, I supported the Cheetahs, and when he played for the Kings, I supported the Kings, even though that was bloody heartbreaking. Because they got hidings all over the place. I mean, people send their C teams to play the Kings and then they lost by 30, 40 points. But no, I've actually never, thought he was going to end up at the Bulls. And then COVID hit. And, I mean, that's when the Kings got into trouble. And every time, because they were very adamant, because Elrich was one of their standout players. So they were very, very adamant in enforcing his contract. So every time somebody started talking to Elrich, and somehow these guys found out, they were just saying to him, "You're going to stay here." And his agent said that they were defaulting on salaries, the Kings. But every time the agent said, "We're going to put them on terms tomorrow," they paid. So they were never in a position where they could get out of the contract at the Kings because they defaulted. So he was loyal to the Kings. He was very loyal to Robbie Kempson. He's still a good friend of Robbie Kempson. And they just called them in one day in a meeting, and they just said to them, "Okay, it's done now. They're going under. Nobody's going to get salaries. You all must move on." And then he got a contract offer. He got an offer from the Lions, from Rudolf Stroili. He did get an offer from the Bulls. I don't think there they talked about the Sharks, but I don't think the Sharks ever really were in the picture. Again, Toulon. But Toulon again wanted to give him a junior contract because he was still a junior. So, and he didn't want a junior contract. So, and the only reason he went to see Rudolf Stroily. He got a meeting with him, and he was very impressed with Rudolf Stroily. He came back to me, and he was very impressed with Rudolf Stroily. And the Lions actually offered him a better contract than the Bulls. But the only reason he decided to go to the Bulls is the Lions wanted to contract him as a lock. Because he was playing lock, junior Bokke, and he was playing lock most of the time at the Kings. But he didn't want to play lock. He wanted to play 7 and 8. So Jake promised him then that he'll play loose forward at the Bulls. And then that's the basis he decided to go to the Bulls.
That's an interesting one because he started at the Bulls just about when Jake started. They sort of more or less 2020, more or less thereabouts. What was his experience like at the Bulls under Jake?
Yes, he was just Jake was a little bit before him. He never really talked about his experience with coaches. He'll just say snippets to me. He'll tell me he needs to go on pension or something like that. He wouldn't, give me detail. But he had a very, very good relationship with Jake, as far as I knew. Somebody told me the other day that there was 2 players with Jake that could get away with murder, and that was Elrich and Johan Goosen. They could do anything; it wouldn't be wrong. Elrich won't do anything wrong. He's too much of a good man for that. But he said so he had a very, very good relationship with Jake, but the cracks was showing at the end.
We're not going to talk about Jake here today. I didn't want to put you on the spot or anything. But the question I want to ask you, Jake is a World Cup winning coach, and he's known for building something from the ground up. And I'm getting to that mentorship almost. And he made Elrich a captain. But what was that like? What did you think about that?
Yes, there was a game they played. I can't remember who they were playing. And when the captain got replaced or injured, Marcel, and you can see who's captain. And I saw Elrich was captain, and I was surprised. I was not expecting it at all. And after that, he was captain quite often. I always knew Elrich wouldn't be a talking captain. Elrich was always going to be a playing captain. He was never going to try and convince people to do what he wants them to do. He's going to show them what he wants to do. He's never been a guy that talks a lot. And if you talk to people that knows him, they'll tell you he doesn't talk at all. He just leads by playing.
And I ask you as a parent, and I just have to tell you, like, I'm getting goosebumps as you talk throughout. So I can imagine what it must be for you. As a parent and a Blue Bulls supporter, I mean, that must have been heaven when he went to the Blue Bulls. Can you talk about what it felt like to see him come onto the field as a Blue Bull and then a captain later on, just as a parent?
Yes, Paul, I'm not gonna try and talk it over in any way. It's an amazing feeling. It's unbelievable. The pride, how proud you are, how happy you are. But in the same breath, I want to tell you that the stress freaking kills me. I always say to people, when your son plays mini rugby, you hope for 3 things. You hope he plays well, you hope his team win, and you hope he doesn't get injured. And when Elrich runs out in front of the Blue Bulls, I still hope the same 3 things. That doesn't change. My involvement changes. You are a spectator now. You're not there. You're not in it. And but You know, I cannot understate how good it is and how nice it is to be Arich's dad. It's amazing. It's an amazing feeling and experience for me. But as I said, the stress is the stress when he plays is nobody can sit with me. I drink 12 liters of water in a game. I you know, it's you cannot explain the. I watched my heart rate the other day when he went up on the field against the Lions, when he went up for the first time after his injury, and I checked my heart rate and it was like 160. Sitting down, doing nothing. It was, yeah, the stress is immense. Every ruck, every tackle is you just the thing when Elrich plays, I don't watch the rugby. I just watch Elrich. I don't look at anybody else. I look only at Elrich. I'm looking for him on the field all the time. Even on TV, it's more difficult on TV because the camera is everywhere else. But yeah, no, but it's an amazing feeling. I can't understate that.
I was going to transition beyond the Bulls to the Springboks. I just wanted to say, as any parent, I can feel your emotion and understand it. But as the parent of like a sporting player, that thing of the pride and the stress at the same time, I just don't know that people can fully understand it. It's an amazing combination. Where, like for me, it's always intriguing on the full Springboks. What is the first time you can remember where you had an inclination or Elrich had an inclination that the Springboks were looking at him, thinking about him? Because, you know, fans always speculate and you always see like people are saying, well, like, why is he not in the Springboks? But where's the first time where you or him kind of had a sense that the Springboks are...
It's difficult. It's a difficult question because it's a long time. Because when he was at the Kings, Robbie Kempson told me he's going to play Springbok. He's going to play Springbok. And when somebody tells you something enough, you believe them. But Rassie at that stage was not even looking at the Kings, and they said as much. They're not even looking at the Kings. So we went to the Bulls, and we had a lot of hope. But Elrich got to the Bulls. Now, the interesting thing is, Elrich's move to the Bulls was quite... There was quite a bit of social media exposure for that. And but when he got there, Jake said to him, "Nee, boy, you're going to train with the juniors. You're not going to play with the senior squad. You're going to..." And he was very upset. He called me and he was very upset. And I just said to him, "Listen, Elrich, you know what to do." And that's where the story comes from him and Dwayne Vermeulen in the training session. Because the juniors was running past the seniors and he was in the juniors. And Jay called him out and said, "Come do this exercise." And he didn't understand the exercise. And he just decided that that's the moment he's going to show Jake he can do it. So, you know, you always hope, but you get checks. You get the odd thing that says, I mean, you want him to be Springbok, but who are they going to drop? They're not going to drop Dwayne. They're not going to drop Peter Steph the toy. Next is, at that stage, Pepsi Buthelezi was before him. There's a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of good rugby players in South Africa. You know, it's a little bit, I want to almost say it's a privilege to become a Springbok. Because you need the stars to align for you to become a Springbok. But you know that when he was chosen into the group, it's a big thing for us, a big thing for us. And that day, that Tuesday, I'll never forget. Oh, you know, they choose the team internally on the Sunday. So then the players are allowed to tell their parents. So he told us on the Sunday or the Monday, I can't remember exactly, But sure, I'm telling you, it was that week was a euphoria. It was out of the world. It's as if you're not part of your own life. It's everybody messages you, everybody calls you. People want to talk to you about it. I mean, all I do is I'm trying to get tickets for Loftus. In the process of thinking I'm going to get tickets, I gave my tickets away and I didn't get the other tickets. Now I'm in a crisis. So, it's a massive experience, but it is lekker. It's a very, very lekker experience. I'm not going to shy away from that.
Just talking about that Duane Vermeulen thing quickly. You just glanced over it, but you mentioned the name. What happened there?
It's quite known. It's been all over social media, the whole thing with him and Duane, because there was they call the exercises shoulder check, which is apparently, I don't understand it 100%. So it's not a completely aggressive thing, but you do run into the opponent, and he just decided it's either me or him, and he just ran over Duane Vermeulen, like straight over him. And it was not the exercise, so Duane was a little bit surprised and wasn't expecting it, but Jake saw what was in Elrich there, and Jake said to Duane, Elrich says, you're a pussy. and Duane said to Jake, okay, put me in front of him again. And apparently Duane tackled Elrich like you can't believe it. He gave him the tackle of his life. Okay, until Nhlabakanya tackled him. Okay, that was the biggest one. But so there's a story about that. And then after the game, after the training, him and Duane just clicked. They just became very, very, very good friends.
And so you get to see your son debut for the Springboks at Loftus Versfeld.
It's yes, Paul. On my way to that game, I was sitting in the car, and I mean the emotions. You can't believe the emotion that goes through you. And unfortunately, I'm a little bit of an emotional guy, and I'm sure you've by now you know that. And you know what? You sit there, and there's, I don't know, I think 60,000 people in Loftus, and only 23 dads in that whole stadium can say their son is on the field. And I mean, that's just unbelievable. Elrich is, in the history of Springboks, Elrich is number 922, which gives you an idea how few become Springboks. It was, and then you almost scored a try. And that was a big thing. And you went onto the field when they were behind against Wales, and he was having a very, very, very good 20 minutes or 30 minutes on the field. And I think he made a difference. In the end, the Springboks won not far, but they did. But it was an amazing day. I'll never forget. And something, I don't know if you want me to continue on that, something that I will cherish like not many other things in my life is after that game against Wales, we were invited to his capping ceremony at Monte Cassino. And you're in a small room, 40 by 30 room with all the Springbok greats. Rassie wasn't there, Jacques Nienaber is there, everybody is there. And they do the ceremony, and everybody congratulates you, everybody that's there, all the players, all the management staff. It was just unreal, the experience. It was completely unreal. I'll never, ever be in that room again. Never be. But that day I was in that room with Elrich, getting his cap. it was an unbelievable experience.
Ja. Ek het goosebumps, man. Ek kry hoendervleis, David. Goeie genade.
I am the same. I feel like Envy, my role on your channel is to be the one that is emotional or sheds a tear. And I cannot imagine how it is for you, David. It's like I am emotional. I was wiping a tear while you were talking about it. I just cannot imagine.
I appreciate that. But you know, Paul, life hands you disappointments for a reason. I mean, he was in that 22. He played the first test at Loftus. The second test, Rassie chose was that completely different, funny team, and they lost against Wales. And then he was on the bench again in Cape Town, but he only played like a minute, not even a minute. He was walking up to a line-out when they called the final whistle, and he played against Argentina in the Rugby Championship, and then Rassie dropped him, and that's a big disappointment. In 23, he was not even looked at for the World Cup squad. He was we didn't even hoped he was going to be, because he was not in the mix at all anymore. And that's once you are up there, it's very hard to go down. It's very difficult to go down, and that influenced him. I think as a person, it influenced his rugby at the Bulls. It was a very, very bad experience for him. Now you've gone from that, your debut, and you just fall right down the floor. So that's just how life is.
Mm-hmm. And in 2024, he made it back, and suddenly he's one of the front runners.
Yeah. The interesting thing is, him and Cameron Hanekom had that exceptional game against Leinster, the semi-final at Loftus. They were, I actually thought, and I don't often do that, but I actually thought Eric should have been man of the match, but Cameron was. They had that, and then they had that totale brain meltdown against Glasgow. So that was a very big disappointment. After the game, Eric came to me and he was standing there and he just said, I don't even know what to do. I don't know what. And he didn't get chosen for the Ireland squad. And that was massive for him, because he thought he was in the mix. He really thought he was in the mix. And he didn't get chosen for the Ireland squad. So he was very, very upset. And then you can remember that they played the two Irish matches, and then they played Portugal in Bloemfontein. And he was off. He was not even training. He was not even nothing. He was doing nothing. And Kwagga Smith called him and said to him, listen, they announced the team internally, and you're in the team for Portugal. I just want to go back a little bit. When he got dropped in 2023, in year of end tour in 2022, he actually got injured in the very last minute against Cardiff. The very last minute, Bismarck du Plessis in a line-out stepped on his ankle, and he injured his ankle. He was chosen for the end of year tour, but he got injured in the very last minute of the very last game. So he didn't go, and Ivan Roos got chosen. So that was a big disappointment. But then they had that the Springbok A squad that also went there, and they played against Glasgow Warriors, and they played against
Bristol.
Yeah, they played 2 or 3 games. And that was like a bit of a lifeline, but that was a horrific. That Springbok A team played very, very badly. So he got sent home. and he didn't play in the end of year tour. So that was a big disappointment for him. And he just had a massive game against Portugal. He just showed that he still have it in him. He was very unfit. He said he nearly died. And from there, he played every single game in 2024 for the Springboks. He didn't miss one game. Not in the championship, not in the end of year tour. He played all the games.
Beginning of this year, January this year, you were at a horse racing event because you've got 30 horses, like you mentioned earlier on in the video. A big thing in your life. You didn't watch this game, and then you got a call from our friend Harry Jones about Elrich being injured in that match against the Lions.
What actually happened is we were at show jumping. My wife does teach show jumping, and my daughter was jumping, and the day that was it. We would have been at Ellis Park, but we had to go to the show. So while we were at the show, Harry started talking to me. I didn't know Harry at all at that stage. I knew about him. I didn't know him. And he started to talk to me. And I said to him, yes, I'm at he's sitting in Texas. I'm sitting in Joburg, 50 kilos from Ellis Park. And he said to me, I said to him, well, I'm here at the show. I can't even see the game. And he said, no, he'll keep me up to date. He'll give me a running commentary. And he was giving me running commentary through the game, and Eric had a big tackle on a guy. Afterwards, I looked at that tackle and I thought he should have gotten a card for that tackle because he was high, he was upright. I think there was even head contact, but they didn't look at it. And I thought, yes, if he just had a card or a red card there, he wouldn't have played. I mean, that's just our parents' it goes. Okay. So we got into the car with horses in the horse box, and we were on the highway. And now my wife was holding the phone, not me. I can't. And I was in a big intersection on the highway with the horses in the back. And Harry just said, "You're not gonna like this." And I just wanted to know. And Harry just gave like sort of. Not information. He just said it's his leg, and they are there with him, and everybody's there with him, and I wanted to know, and he was not saying to me, and then I said to him, I've asked him what's happened, and he said I think his leg is broken. I think So I mean that was not a pleasant experience at all. That was very, 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 very bad for me.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what's going on. I've always had like somebody at the Bulls that I talked to. I got into a good relationship with Bismarck du Plessis. So every time something would happen with Elrich, I would. And at that stage, I didn't have anybody because Bismarck was obviously not there anymore. And it was just, very frustrating not knowing what exactly is the extent of it. I gathered that it must be serious when they took him off with a golf cart. But I mean, that was just you just want to get home and you just want to know, and you don't. That's a extremely bad experience.
Yeah, we didn't know because they obviously didn't show the injury. Didn't show, it was like it happened on TV, and then you didn't know what happened as well. Even while we were watching the game, I remember I was in the Drakensberg thing, and Harry was still saying, "What must I say? What must I say?" to you now, because obviously, it was quite intense. And then Elrich went through, you talked about his grit earlier on, that time he got back on the horse after 3 days, that around the Vaaldam thing, showed that endurance, that can he do it spirit that we were talking about. Talk to us about that journey, this last 10 months, how tough that's been. And you just mentioned the highlight of this is he's getting married soon.
Yeah, it's the uncertainty initially was bad, because there was people that said it's a career-ending injury. There was people that said he's going to be okay. You had to they couldn't operate because you must wait for the swelling to go down. They can't see on the scans because of the swelling. You don't, when something like that happens, all you want is information. That's the one thing that you crave the most, and you don't get it. You don't get the information. You don't get the feedback. You don't get to talk to the doctors. You don't get to, I mean, we went to visit him the next day, and I heard that Peter Steph the Toy's dad gave a piece of his hamstring for his.
Achilles.
And I just said to him, do you want a piece of my hamstring? And he just said, no, he doesn't want anything. He just, it's so the uncertainty is a big thing. But Elrich is sort of a silent warrior. He's like a samurai or something. He doesn't tell you, I'm going to play again. I'll be there. I'll be Springbok again. He doesn't do that. But you can see it in the way he handles his rehabilitation and how he handles it emotionally. When you are really down, and trust me, you're down then. You're very, very down then. You come from watching your child singing the national anthem, playing against the All Blacks in Ellis Park, to watching your child with a blown up knee in hospital. It's a difference in night. It's a free fall. It is you as a person, and I did an interview with somebody and they took it completely out of context. But the reality is that a part of my identity is my children. A part of my identity is to be Elrich's dad. A part of my identity is to be the parent of the guy that runs in front of the Bulls. And all of a sudden, I'm not that anymore. All of a sudden, I'm just Elrich's dad. And that was a bit of a... I had to adapt. I had to look into myself of what is in it for me, am I being what is hoogmoedig in English? Am I
prideful? What's
Arrogant. Prideful.
Not arrogant.
Arrogant or prideful.
Prideful.
Yes. Am I arrogant because I'm Elrich's dad? So it's a big. As I was saying, the whole uncertainty. Is he going to play again? Is he going to come back? But quite soon after the operation, the doctor said it was a very big success. You'll make a full recovery. It's going to take a very long time, but you will be okay.
Could I ask you, David, there's your two kinds of parents at that moment with the injury. It's just the dad of Elrich, not the rugby player, and he's healthy still, and then there's the dad of Elrich, the Springbok, and his career is in jeopardy. Was that difficult for you to kind of separate those two?
Yes. Yes, it was very, very difficult in terms of exactly what you're saying there. Because Elrich was not a type of person that's going to cry on my shoulder. He was not that big. But me as a parent, I wanted that. I wanted him to cry on my shoulder. I wanted him to put my arms around him and pat his back and say it's going to be okay. But he's not that child. He's not like that. On the way to the hospital the Sunday morning, me and my wife were driving on the way there, and there was I cannot remember exactly, but there was parents that lost their child to some horrific accident or something. And I said to my wife, that just gives you a little bit of perspective. That just gives you a little bit of, what it is actually all about. It's not it's not about you. It's about life and what happens in life and how it goes on. And for some people, it stops. You know, when somebody close to you die, you just want the world to stop for 1 second. You just want the world not to go on. But the world just goes on. It doesn't stop. And it's the same, you know. So it did give me a little bit of perspective, but it was very, very hard for me to be in the middle of that. Erich didn't make me a very much part of his journey, but he did give me, you know, feedback on the rehabilitation and how it was going, and the doctors was, you know, it was always positive, the feedback.
David, my last question on this is, how did it feel when at the end of almost a year, you saw him go back on the field for the first time? And last week, I watched the game on Saturday, and even though the result was not the best one, I was a little bit like you watching Elrich. I knew this conversation was coming up. He was back on. He looked pretty good. He had a good game. How does it feel for you after that, the low? There is a saying that in my family we use a lot that says the highs of your highs are defined by the lows of your lows, or the opposite way around. How did it feel for you after that year, all that anguish, to just see him back on the field and he's looking good? And how does it feel?
Paul, can I be brutally honest? I didn't enjoy that stress coming back. I was sort of in a very funny way enjoying the break from that, from the worry. And now, after experiencing the injury, the stress is even more. But I was very happy for him. He was very happy the few minutes he played against the Lions. He played hard. He didn't get opportunity because the Bulls were on the back foot all the time. But he tackled well. He went into I could see he's got confidence, or not confidence. I could see he trusted his knee. And he didn't get to really play against Bordeaux. I think he only played like 5 minutes against Bordeaux. But then the game against Northampton, when he started, he played really well. Even the Rugby 365 guys gave him an 8 out of 10 and said he was the standout of the Bulls. So that's just relief in a big way. But yes, so I'm happy for him. You know, the other thing that we haven't touched on, that was a really big thing, is the one moment you are the captain of the Bulls, you are in the leadership group, you are in the meetings, you are in the even in the keerders, the guys, the team, the selectors, you even in the selectors meetings. And when you get injured, you are out. You're not part of the team. You're not part of meetings. You're not part of decisions. You only go in, you do your rehab, and you go home. That's all you do. And that's a big, big thing for a rugby player, to all of a sudden not be part of anything. And that's a massive psychological thing. Now, I've got no idea if within the Bulls camp he got psychological help. I don't know, honestly. But that's a big thing for a rugby player. When you go from being there to being not part of it at all. And that's I'm going back to it now, but I just thought of that.
Yeah, that's actually quite an important point, that I didn't even thought of that. Sure. David, we're running out of battery and we're running out of internet. So I think this has been an eye-opener of a conversation, and I thank you for being on it with us and being so honest. Paul, you want to close this out?
Yes, David, I can just say, first of all, what a privilege for me to meet you. And
yes.
You and Envia are slowly, player by player, convincing me to follow the Bulls more. And I would just tell you, like, I'm living vicariously, me and my wife, to people like your son and other Springboks and other rugby players, and they make the country proud. It's such a tremendous once in a generation. I think it's always a privilege to be a Springbok, but to be in this era, and I know it's extra hard for your son because they're so competitive and it's whatever, but it's just a privilege for me to meet you. And I truly hope that Elrich continues on his recovery journey and makes it back into the Springbok team where he deserves to be. And then the last thing I'd say, the advice, I always give Envy advice because I'm the old guy on the podcast. If I could go back and live my life again when my son was a serious athlete, not at the level of your son, it would be to enjoy the moments more and not to let the stress eat me up, and just enjoy it, because it will be over before you know it. And I would just say, I'm going to watch every game that Elrich plays and follow him. And I hope I get to meet you someday.
No, I think you certainly will. And I appreciate, the opportunity to, to sort of give a little bit of, perspective, if that's the right word. Something that you said, Nana, when we were a little bit off air, is people don't realize the effect that when they say bad things about a player on social media or about a team or about what's happening, the effect of that, people don't realize that. Social media's made us all journalists because we can get our opinion out there. And people don't think before they say. They just say stuff. And that it does get to them. All the players, if you ask them, they'll say, we're not watching the social media. But let me tell you, it gets to them. They know about it. So yes, I appreciate that very much. And I really hope that it was good for you.
It was. Envy and me talk about it often. We know these are professionals. We know they're well paid. We know it's their job. But I always tell him, I remember and know that there's someone's son and someone's dad and someone's husband. And we have to remember that these are human beings and not treat them like they're robots or discardable things. So for me, this was a tremendous, I just felt like it was such an honor to hear from you firsthand. Thank you very much.